It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
It's not because your teenager is dumb. And let's not say that the brain is not sufficiently developed. It's not sufficiently mature, but it's actually overdeveloped. There's too much going on up there in the brain. And you know what? They only do stupid things when they're around their friends.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Hello, it's Dr. Justin Coulson, the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. I'm laughing because, well, I'm being criticised. I'm not sitting up straight and tall. I'm slouching in my seat. Mrs. Happy Families has just walked into the room, left the door open. I've got the heater on. It's so cold. I hate winter. Can I tell you how much I hate winter?
JR, bring on the violins.
I can't believe you're doing this. You're sitting there in a T-shirt. It doesn't make sense to me. Kylie, this week we've had some conversations about parenting myths. I think they've been really great conversations. Yesterday, an amazing discussion with James Anderson about growth mindset ideas and how we've got these myths in our heads about how our brains work. Today, we don't have time for anything except to get straight into the myths. We have 4 of them that we're supposed to talk about in this podcast, and they're all absolute crackers. So, myth number 1.
That we should be able to continue doing all of the things that we did before children after we have them.
That's going to make some parents laugh straight away because they know it's not true, except I think when we had our first baby, other than the fact that it took a whole lot longer to get in the car and get going because of nappies and nappy bags and all the prep, I don't think that our lives, did our lives change enormously with baby number 1?
No, I don't think they did. And even with baby number 2, we had a 3-year gap between baby 1 and baby 2. So I feel like, you know, we kind of got into a good rhythm and we were able to kind of function. But baby number 3 was a game changer.
Before we get to baby number 3, though, I want to question the premise of this whole thing. Like, there is an idea that we should be able to do all the things that we were doing before we had a baby. Everyone knows that's not true, and yet we still try to do it. But why? Like, when you have a baby, you don't have a baby so that life can stay the same. Or do you?
I think for me, I can only speak for me personally, when I gave birth, I became a mother, but I also a daughter and a wife and a person who has interests that take me out of the home. For some of us, we are employees or we're an employer. And when we add mother to our list, in some ways, it actually is all-encompassing and takes in all of those other roles. And sometimes we find ourselves kind of wondering who we are because we lose a lot of those other interests as a result of the magnitude of responsibility that's placed on our shoulders as a parent.
Yeah, I get where you're going with that, and it makes sense. I guess from an identity point of view I do, but from an efficiency point of view, like, you don't have children and expect that life will be efficient and that you're going to be able to get things done easily.
I think that in theory, we understand that life is going to change, but I think that on the ground, practical...
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you don't holiday the same way with kids that you do without. As soon as you've had a baby...
I don't think you ever realise just how life-changing having a child will be.
You don't breakfast the way that you did. You don't sleep the way that you did. You don't prepare food. You're right. You don't do anything the way that you did. But it's not until you have the baby that you realise just how much it changes.
And depending on your child's temperament, the challenges that might arise as a result of, you know, feeding challenges or sleep challenges, like there are so many varied possibilities.
So the myth is that we should be able to do the kinds of things that we did before babies when we do have babies, but you can't. Not if you want to give yourself to the role.
I think that for a time you can probably.
But not if you want to give yourself to the role fully. Not when your sleep's disturbed and all those kinds of things. Unless you're bringing in outside help, unless you're going to ignore some of the very significant and real needs of your child or delegate them to somebody else. If you're going to be the primary carer of your child or one of the primary carers of your child, then your life is going to change. And it's a myth that you shouldn't expect that. People who say, no, we're going to do it all on a routine, it's all going to work out and I'm going to be able to do all the stuff that I did. It's not realistic, is it?
It really isn't. And I think that as a mum of 3 children, having gone through baby number 1, baby number 2, and feeling like not much changed, and then recognising that all of a sudden I was completely incapacitated. I actually stopped being able to do anything for a time because I pretty much had a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
It was so intense. And I've watched mums over and over again go through the same process, desperately trying to kind of keep their identity of who they were before while adding this full-time job to an already full-time life and falling to pieces. And I just wish that we understood that it's okay for things to change, and just because they're changing doesn't make them better or worse. It just is.
Well, I guess that kind of leads into the next myth that we want to discuss, and we'll probably do it fairly briefly because there's not a lot more to add to what we've already said, but the myth that when you have kids, they just need to follow your routine. They need to fit in with your life. There's a myth that you can actually get your kids to fit in with your life.
Yep.
And I think that we can pop that straight away because kids aren't interested in your life and they're not interested in fitting in with it. And when you try to get them to do that, it requires something that I think it's superhuman and not natural.
Look, putting a disclaimer out, it took me 6 children to actually learn this. I've had so many parents over the years just say, let your baby sleep. And it's like, well, no, actually, I've got to go and do the groceries and I've got to do this. And you just get them up and you take them out and you do what you've got to do. And it wasn't until baby number 6 that I realised if I just let her sleep and do what I need to do in her wake time, my whole world changed. It was a completely different process. She was a calmer baby. I was a calmer mum. And while I didn't have the high energy impact life that I had been living beforehand, it actually was such a beautiful time to rejuvenate.
It's kind of a little advertisement for slow parenting.
Yeah.
Because we're not slow people. We've never slowed down. But when we did have our little baby girl, Emily, our last one, we definitely, or you definitely slowed down. I don't know how to do that, but you definitely slowed down and it made a difference. So myth number 1, that we should be able to do everything that we did before kids once kids come along, just not realistic. And we need to accept that there are limitations and boundaries on how far we can go, what we can do, and how it's all going to work, at least until they get a lot older and they start to function a lot more like adults. And when I say a lot older, I'm not talking 4 or 5 or 6 or even 7. I'm talking 12, 13, 14. And they still interrupt your life in all kinds of crazy ways. And the second idea that kids should follow our routine, it's just not going to happen. After the break, 2 myths that I can't wait to talk about. The first one, that it should be easy to love your kids. And then the myth that all teens are nutcases. Your daughter just walked by, eyes glued to her phone, expression unreadable. You ask her to put it down, but she balks. You know it's not good for her, but you're not sure why or how to support better choices. In the webinar Pixel Perfect, I join with psychologist and teen tech expert Jocelyn Brewer to discuss how to set screen boundaries that work for you and your daughter. Check out Pixel Perfect now on the Happy Families webshop.
It's the Happy Families podcast, the podcast for the time poor parent who just wants answers now. And I'm wondering, has it been easy to love our kids?
Yes. For me it has. But I didn't love them the instant that I met them in every case.
Their squishy, mangled up faces.
No, it wasn't that. I distinctly remember it with baby number 1. I mean, things got easier with subsequent children. I kind of understood the role of father a lot more. But with baby number 1, I've read stories about how when a dad holds his baby for the first time or sees that birth for the first time, and it changes him forever. He knows that things are different now. And yet with baby number 1 and even with baby number 2, I remember I was actually pretty keen to get back to work. It's like, okay, well, I've stayed up all night. I've supported you. But I'm just going to get back to life now. And I know that you're going to be at home and have to do whatever you've got to do as a mum, but I've got stuff to do. It didn't really change me at all. And it took me time to get used to having this other body, this other human in our space, in our home.
Or even sharing that other body with me.
Yeah. Not being able to get access to you and you being exhausted and all that kind of thing. And I'm not even talking about anything sort of romantic or intimately. I just mean being able to be in our partnership together, in our marriage together. It took ages for me to really feel like, this is my daughter. This is our daughter, but she's also my daughter, and I'm crazy about her. I was not crazy about our kids initially when they came on. Certainly the first couple. I got better and better at it over time, but I still found them an impediment, an annoyance. I found them frustrating. It's only been the last couple of kids that I've absolutely cherished and embraced it all and loved them from the minute I met them. Probably the last 3 kids. First 3, not so much. And I don't know if it's because it's who I am or if it's a process that we all go through as parents, but having more kids has been the best thing for me in terms of learning how to love them and embrace them and cherish them. What about you?
I think for me, having gone through the physical changes that take place as you actually grow a child, there's instant love. And as soon as that baby's placed on my chest, there's just this is mine.
And I've watched that happen with you.
Yeah. I remember the 2 that stand out to me the most, baby number 1, I was so tiny back then and she was Michelin man.
Yeah.
And I literally looked at her and looked at my little body and couldn't work out where she'd come from because she took up, I couldn't even roll her into a ball to fit her in the space where she should have been. It was amazing. And I don't think I really slept for 5 days straight because I just couldn't take my eyes off her. It was the most amazing experience. And then going through a completely different experience with baby number 5 and having a cesarean emergency Caesar and having this being placed on me but not actually understanding where she'd really come from because I hadn't gone through the process that I had with the previous 4. And so she was probably the one that I struggled to kind of just connect with the most just in that initial stage. But I was really grateful. I had a beautiful midwife and she just refused to let that baby leave my side. And so for 3 hours while I waited in recovery, she was on my chest.
So important, so
and
valuable.
It was. And so by the end of that time, there was that deep connection. But that initial kind of, it was very alien-like.
I remember having a conversation with a mum quite a number of years ago who said that she had a 7-year-old, her eldest child of 3. She said she really loved and connected with and found the children number 2 and 3 absolutely the light of her life, but she felt like she'd never connected with child number 1, just never connected. And we see this stuff whether it's with postnatal depression or whether it's just temperaments and individual differences. But if you're a parent who doesn't feel like you're connecting with your child, please understand it is a myth that you should connect with your child, especially from the very instant. Sometimes these connections take time to grow. Sometimes they require special interventions. Sometimes connections are just stronger with some individuals than with others. And it's a myth that
just because you're blood.
Yeah, that it's going to be easy to love your kids. I mean, one of our children right now for me is particularly not easy to love. I know that I'm a parenting expert on a parenting podcast saying that I'm struggling to love one of our kids, but
I don't think it's love. I think...
Well, I love her and cherish her deeply, but I'm really struggling with her. I don't like...
Yeah, no, and I agree totally.
I enjoy being around her because she's so obstinate and so dishonest. And there are so many things going on with this kid right now, which only requires more of us. It's not a reason to turn away from her.
It's interesting. I just read a friend put a post up today and she just acknowledged that with her youngest, she feels like unless she's rewriting history, she has never connected with a child as much as she's connected with this one. And then just as she kind of has thought about it a bit more deeply, she said, I wonder if it's because she's the child that's challenged me the most. She's the one that's actually, I've had to work so hard to understand her. And then the acknowledgement that isn't that what all relationships should be like. The more energy we put into them, the greater the outcome and the benefit of that.
So that's what's remarkable. The more you put in, even if you're not getting anything back from them, that does something to you. It changes your heart. Yeah,
it's about turning towards your child.
Beautiful. All right, the last myth. We've only got a minute for it because our time is running out. Teens are stupid is the final myth. And I did a webinar.
Are you sure that's not true?
I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago. I have to pop this myth. If you're a parent of a teenager who's doing things that do not make sense, things that are unwise, unsafe, unhealthy, it's not because your teenager is dumb. And let's not say that the brain is not sufficiently developed. It's not sufficiently mature, but it's actually overdeveloped. There's too much going on up there in the brain. And you know what? They only do stupid things when they're around their friends. And not all teens do this. Like when you look at the statistics, most teens get through their adolescent years relatively unscathed without doing anything particularly crazy, anything breathtakingly harmful. Most teens manage to get through their adolescent years in pretty safe, pretty healthy, reasonably wise ways. And in fact, research shows that adolescents, so long as they're not hanging out with dumb friends, adolescents are just as intelligent as adults and are just as capable of putting together strong, rational arguments or reasons for or against something.
You know, I think for me, I would actually be more concerned if my kids weren't pushing against the boundaries, if they weren't kind of trying things. And I love the energy that our teenagers have. Yeah. And I love that they're able to live life without fear. You know, as an adult, you become so much more concerned and risk averse. And we don't take those big jumps and leaps in life that youth often will, not because they're being negligent or it's kind of like, if I jump, what's the worst thing that can happen? I fall on my bum and I get back up.
Yeah,
they don't see,
metaphorically speaking, of course.
Yeah, they don't see all of the pitfalls that could possibly happen that experience and maturity often make us focus on more.
And in a typically developing, healthy, psychologically healthy adolescent, you're exactly right. We're seeing an increase in mental health issues for young people, which reduces the joy and the spark and the energy and all those things that you're describing. But in normal circumstances, in typical circumstances, you're absolutely right. So there are 4 myths to bust. That means we've busted, I think, 8 myths this week about parenting. I hope you've really enjoyed the conversation. And if you can think of any other myths that need to be discussed, maybe even need to be busted, we'd love for you to let us know. Podcasts at happyfamilies.com.au. Tomorrow, it's our I'll Do Better Tomorrow episode. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. We love so much that you choose to spend your time with us each day listening to the Happy Families podcast. We really hope that you're getting something out of it. And if you are, if you could leave us a 5-star rating and review on your Apple Podcasts app. It only takes about 15 seconds and it helps other people to find out about the podcast, discover how it can make their families happier and all that jazz. If you would like more info about how you can make your family happier, please join us at happyfamilies.com.au.